Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you?
I'm no one. There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you.
My Nerd Road.
Just let it in.
Welcome to it. I am your host, Jon Justice, here to talk about Chapter 4 of Obi Wan Kenobi. I've got issues. I'm sorry. I have to be honest and upfront. There are things about the chapter that I enjoyed, but there are things that I just I simply cannot ignore. So I just want to be upfront about that. I try to keep it as positive as possible, but I also want to be honest. And on a first watch, I've watched the episode twice now. On a first watch, I had a lot of issues with it. On a second watch, I felt a little better about it. It has very little to do with story, and it's the way the story is being told. It's visual, it's editing, it's story beat problems that I have. I don't know why this show feels so much like a TV show. But it is a TV show, John. I understand that. But they have a lot of money. And The Mandalorian doesn't necessarily look like a TV show. Parts of Book of Boba Fett looks like a TV show. But Obi Wan Kenobi seems to be suffering from the same issue that I had with a lot of parts of the Book of Boba Fett, and it just seems lean. It just seems really, really lean. There are shots that seem like I don't understand the logic behind some of them, and I know that this is off the beaten path of how I normally am on the show, and it could be partly because I'm dealing with a lot of stress right now in my life, as I've mentioned on the show, this upcoming surgery, which got delayed, unfortunately. And I'll, for those that want to stick around to hear that story, I'll share it with you at the end of the show. I won't get into it now. On a rewatch, I felt better about it, but I want to be honest and kind of run through some of the issues that I'm having with the show, and some things I just don't quite understand. And again, I know that I'm going to be more negative than I typically am, but I also need to be honest when I do the show, and I hope that you appreciate that. And if you love it and you think it's great and you have no issues with it, you know what? I'm really, really glad. I'm super happy because I wish that I didn't. But we're getting a story of characters that I love, and I just don't understand why certain decisions are being made. And it really comes down to that. It's not a matter of, I would have done it this way. It's a matter of certain things that could have easily have been changed, and there would have been no problem, and I find myself scratching my head. And the last thing I want to do is turn into one of the negative individuals out there, trying to make an extra buck for slamming on Star Wars. I'm not. This is not you ruined my Star Wars. I still like, Obi-Wan Kenobi more than most other shows out there. I will say that I've been watching simultaneously Star Trek Strange New Worlds. I watched 3 episodes of that, and it's great. And maybe that's affecting a bit of my view of Obi-Wan Kenobi because I'm watching this other science fiction show that I'm kind of enjoying more, which is making me sad. So let me start off here. And again, I'm just being honest. If you feel differently, that's totally fine, and you're welcome to share it with me, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com, or if you're listening to this on YouTube, leave a comment on my YouTube page. It's totally fine if you disagree with me, and if you don't have any problems with what I'm mentioning, I'm really glad. I wish I didn't. I'm not so sure Deborah Chow was the right choice to direct the show. And if she was the right choice, I'm not so sure she didn't need a Jon Favreau or a Dave Filoni perhaps guiding them a little bit more. I think Star Wars needs a very delicate touch. And I don't think just anybody can go and direct this show. I know Deborah Chow did some good episodes of The Mandalorian and episodes I liked. But some of the decisions being made between Deborah Chow and the cinematographer, and that's really where this comes down to, I don't think they're the right choices, and it's not lending itself to the cinematic nature of the story that's being told. I'll wait to see, obviously, until these last 2 episodes, because this episode was really short. I think this episode would have been better served either being rolled into another episode, or, to be honest, there's a part of me that thinks this episode didn't even need to happen. That you could have taken the elements that moved the story forward, because there weren't very many of them, and put them in another episode, either before or afterwards, and made those ones a little bit longer. So let me tell you what it is that I'm talking about. I will talk about some positive things that I do like about the show. Share with you some of the comments from the writer Joby Harold from Star Wars News Net that adds a little bit of context to some issues that I have that hopefully will get resolved in these next 2 episodes. And then we'll get to your listener feedback this week. So some problems that I had with this particular episode. The show is sorely lacking, in my opinion, on some good Star Wars tropes and little tiny details that make Star Wars different and unique. The opening of this particular episode with the up-close shot of Obi Wan Kenobi injured after his fight with Darth Vader, and Tala, I kept saying Tia last week, I got that wrong, it's Tala. Tala on the ship, taking her to Jabim, right? Jabin. You don't see the ship at all. You don't see the planet that they're arriving on. It's all very up close, and then foggy shots because Obi-Wan's in a haze, and then we get him in the back to tank, and he has this, what we appear to be as a connection with Darth Vader in the other back to tank, and he freaks out, and then he pops out freaking out because he's dealing with PTSD. If we're building up drama and tension, it just, for me, it's not working. It took them. I mean, he wasn't in the back to tank very long and hadn't healed very much. And this is really nitpicky. I'm going to be a little less nitpicky. I'm just saying the way it played out at the beginning was really fast. I didn't mind once he got out of the back. I thought it was good once he got out of the back to tank, and we see a ship in the background. We see the establishment of what seems to be sort of a pre-rebellion, and it's really early stages on this planet. We get this new character who is the leader of this, O'Shea Jackson, who is the leader of this group, right? The son of Ice Cube. And I enjoyed the stuff with him. We get a very typical sort of Star Wars trope of setting up how they need to go back and get Princess Leia on Inquisitorius, how there's no shields there. This is how we're going to do it. But immediately, you're kind of sitting back, and at least, okay, I'm kind of sitting back going, we've had this story already. We had it in Chapter 2. Princess Leia was kidnapped, taken hostage. We have moments with her captor, and here we get them with Reva. We get a lot of different interrogation scenes with Reva that just didn't really work for me. Princess Leia is great. The young girl that plays the character is absolutely fantastic. But we get the setup there on this new planet, but we don't really get the typical Star Wars trope of pulling back and seeing the world a little bit more. I had a similar issue with Solo when they get to Mimban, and we get that flash forward 3 years at the beginning of Solo when he's on this planet, and it was a reshoot, and I understand why they did this, but there's all this dust and atmosphere, and it's dark, and you don't really get a good sense of where you are, and it comes off as cheap. And it was similar to me on this planet where we never pulled back to even see what the landscape looked like. It was really, really weird. So, and again, the entire story is basically sort of a redo of Leia being kidnapped and having to be rescued again. We get some cool elements. We get Obi Wan Kenobi trying to tap back into the Force. We certainly get some good lightsaber action when we're on Inquisitorius. But when they arrive on the planet where the Inquisitor's base of operations is, and we do get an establishing shot of the Imperial ship being flown by Tala arriving on the planet. We see it flying over the water, heading towards Inquisitorius. But when she comes into land, and again, I'm nitpicking here, but it matters to me. we get this wonky effect shot of the ship sort of coming in head on and landing. And typically in Star Wars, we get a really good dynamic shot of a ship coming in and landing and the door opening up and walking out. And there's a lot of drama to it. And that's what the show seems to be missing, is sort of that gravitas. So here's a ship, it's landing, and now we're walking out. And let me give you another example of this, by the way. In Chapter 3, when we're on the mining planet, and they're in the safe house, doing that thing with my fingers. First off, there's a weird moment when they go inside the safe house, and I think I may have mentioned this last week, but they go inside the safe house, it's light outside, and then when Vader shows up, it's dark. Movies do this all the time. It just drives me nuts. I'm like, okay, the sun went down. I got it. But we were not in there very long. But, Obi-Wan gets this feeling, and then we all know it's going to be Vader, and he looks outside, and then there's Vader's just there. Well, why couldn't we have gotten a scene of Vader coming in and landing like we do most every other time? Kylo Ren at the beginning of The Force Awakens arriving, or Kylo Ren at any moment in The Force Awakens, when he arrives on his ship and lands and comes out in dramatic fashion with the music and all that. We just kind of get this, he's here. In that episode last week, there was a shot where Obi Wan Kenobi was running away among the piles of dirt, and he runs in between two dirt piles, but the framing of the next shot shows him running the other direction. Almost as if he ran back the other way. Just weird little things like that. So when they arrive in Chapter 4 to Inquisitorius, and the ship is coming in before it. So the ship comes in, it lands, Tala leaves. And then suddenly we see Obi Wan Kenobi underwater. Well, the Star Wars thing to do would have been to show like Obi Wan Kenobi going down, jumping out of the ship and going down into the water. It just seems like there's little tiny things to add elements to this that don't make it come off so cheap and make it seem more cinematic, where we're getting just more story to it and more weight. I was listening to Knights of Vader, and Zach on Knights of Vader kind of had some similar commentary to what I'm sharing with you, and he made a comment that this was made like in the middle of COVID, and also at a time when Disney was losing a lot of money. And he thinks that actually there's maybe some intention here, that maybe Disney is trying to get us accustomed to this type of visuals and storytelling. I just think if they are, that it's really unfortunate that we got it with Obi Wan Kenobi. The moment when Tala chokes out the Imperial officer, he comes up, says she's not supposed to be at that station. She takes him behind some Imperial version of like a cubicle wall, right, and chokes him out. We get a shot, ground level, of the camera panning over, seeing the guy either knocked out or dead behind this cubicle, for lack of a better word, and Tala's just over there sitting at her desk still. He's kind of out in the open. They even referenced this on the Nerdist podcast going through the Easter eggs of the show. That, I mean, they kind of laughed it off, but for me, when I'm watching it and things that take me out of the movie, out of the show, it's like, oh, okay, I don't, that seems really odd. When Obi-Wan Kenobi stops the glass from breaking when they're being chased by the Purge troopers and the stormtroopers. Great moment. A lot of tension there, running down the hall. They've got Leia back now. Tala's like, you gotta go. And Obi-Wan's trying to holding the water back and the glass from breaking. He's waiting for the exact moment. And so he does. And he breaks not only that glass, but the other glass as well. And he runs down the hall, beats the water, door closes behind him. We're all fine and dandy. I didn't have any problems with it. Apart from the fact that a second later, you see a shot through the glass and the stormtroopers are there floating, but they're already dead. It's little things like that, and suddenly now I find myself sounding like all those negative YouTubers, and I don't want to. But it's little tiny things like that even on a rewatch, I had a really difficult time with. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. The end of the episode, you get this, it's kind of silly moment of Obi-Wan sneaking out Leia underneath his coat, and nobody notices. And then we get to the sort of the climactic escape moment, and you get the T-47 speeders that show up. Awesome. great sort of fanboy moment that I'm down for, right? We haven't seen speeders since The Empire Strikes Back, and here they come in, flying over a water planet, no less, and it answers this question of, they called them snow speeders in The Empire Strikes Back, but in reality, they were just speeders. Because they even said we're having trouble adapting them to the cold. And so these were speeders that we know could be used in other environments other than the snow. There was even a sand speeder version that was released as a Lego years ago that I'm convinced was supposed to be seen in The Last Jedi that got cut. And I've talked about that a long time ago. But when the speeders show up, the effects and the framing of the shots were just amateurish. So, I'll look past that and kind of get into it. And on a rewatch, it wasn't quite as wonky as I thought, but here's where I have another issue. So the speeders come in, you got Wade and the female pilot. The female pilot rescues Tala, Leia, and Obi-Wan. Okay, cool. The cockpit, by the way, on the speeder opened up differently. It opened up more like a Mandalorian. No, sorry, Mandalorian. A DeLorean. The doors kind of opened up sideways, right? Which was different than what we've seen before. Probably done for story effect more than anything else, right? But still different than what we've seen before in the past. So Wade and his speeder is now squaring off against Reva, while Obi-Wan, Tala, Leia, and the other speeder pilot fly away. And then the brother Inquisitor shows up. The Wade begins to fly away in his speeder. We get this really cool moment where Reva picks up some type of explosive or mechanical box and force throws it at the speeder, blows him up, and Wade sadly dies. Here's where I have the problem. The other speeder is still in the air. I know those speeders cannot fly into space, right? Which I would assume the Empire would also know that as well. There has to be a ship nearby. So nobody calls the troopers to their ships to go chase down these valuable people, right? You got a whole bunch of ships, not just TIE fighters either. You got transports, you've got smaller ships, you got all kinds of ships there. Anybody could hop into any of them. Reva could have hopped into a ship and gone after him. But we do find out later on when Vader shows up in a cool moment and almost chokes Reva out and kills her. She says that she planted a tracking device, so she let them go. Cool. No problem with that. That's a typical Star Wars trope. The problem I have is that she was the only one that knew that at the time. And the brother didn't know it. None of the other officers in the hangar bay knew it. And nobody else bothered to go chase after them. It's just little things like that. There were small, tiny things that they could have changed. And I don't understand why those decisions are being made. The torture chamber for Leia was massive. It was this huge, huge empty room with one chair in the center of it and nothing else around. I'm like, what? Why? The torture chair, like when we saw in The Force Awakens, was in a smaller room. It makes more sense. You see Snoke in the hologram in The Force Awakens, and he's in this big, massive room that looks empty, but if you look around, there's a whole bunch of chairs. So clearly it's a place where the officials come and meet with Snoke. So again, and I'm sorry if you're disappointed listening to me because I'm being negative. I'm really, really sorry. And again, if you loved it, I'm legitimately happy for you because I wish I didn't have these particular issues with it. But this is something I don't get because I didn't even see these types of problems in the Book of Boba Fett. The Book of Boba Fett came down to other issues that I had that were actually more kind of do with the storytelling. This here, the story is good, but it just feels like we've stretched it out for stretching it out's sake. So, okay. Let me get into a few things that I did like about the episode. I love the exchange at the end with Leia and Obi-Wan. Leia's fantastic. It was a heartwarming moment there between the two of them. I thought the action with Obi-Wan taking out the stormtroopers, and even in the torture room when the lights got turned off and he's sneaking around with his saber, very reminiscent to how we saw Ahsoka do the same thing in her episode in season 1 of The Mandalorian when she's working through the forest and turning her lightsabers off and they can't see her. I liked Vader's scene when Vader shows up and he's all ticked off and in a rage, ready to kill Reva. I thought that was cool. I like Inquisitorius as a place. I think that it's a, sort of a Death Star avatar, if you will, and it works well. The cocooned Jedi were creepy and intriguing, but unfortunately, I don't think we're going anywhere with that. So I hope that I'm not as disappointed in the next 2 episodes. I thought the show really started off strong, but this episode made me go back and sort of point to like a few other things in the other episodes that really kind of bugged me. In episode 2, after Obi-Wan saves Leia from falling off the building, spoiler alert, within seconds he's back at ground level. It's like little teeny tiny things like that. And we did get some good spaceship establishing shots, like when they arrive on the planet in episode 3 and the transport comes in and lands. But I just feel like the show, for a budgetary reason or some reason, is lacking a lot of those very quintessential Star Wars trope visual moments that are taking away some of my enjoyment of it and making it feel way more like a low-budget TV show than something I would expect coming from Disney and Lucasfilm. So I would love to hear from you, and I will share your positive thoughts about the show on next week's episode. Like I said, my surgery got delayed, so I will be doing a show next week. I would love to hear from you. And again, if you're disappointed by my take on this, I'm really sorry. But at the same time, I want to keep it real on here, and I just been I'm just was expecting a lot more, and it's I'm really surprised that it hasn't. I'm surprised like this.
This is not going to go the way you think.
All right, Star Wars Newsnet has this. Let's move on to some other stuff. Joby Harold described, the writer of Obi Wan Kenobi, the show has built a mystery box around Moses Ingram's character, and 4 episodes in has yet to unveil its biggest secrets. For instance, the long-running theory about the show's opening scene has been that the third sister, who we meet in her adult form in the scene right after, was one of the younglings when we meet at the Jedi Temple trying to escape Order 66. Harold wouldn't speak to that directly when asked by the Hollywood Reporter. I won't speak to that, but I will say that Reva is a character that I find to be fascinating. Moses Ingram has done amazing things with her. Hopefully he isn't answering the question, because the last 2 episodes will finally address it. Star Wars loves its mysteries, especially since it's the Disney era, and while some thought we'd be cutting back to that opening scene each subsequent episode, the show still hasn't acknowledged it again. It's similar to another mystery surrounding the character of Reva, who's in the 2nd episode revealed that she knew that Darth Vader is actually Anakin Skywalker. Most people have been complaining that she wouldn't be able to know, and that is one of the biggest secrets inside the Empire. Once again, Harold wouldn't answer. He said, "I love that Reva is still this mystery box, so I tried to speak to her as little as possible. I'm going to keep it that way, but the notion of having a character that we don't know on a legacy show where we do know everything about everyone's part is the fun part of the show. So, less is said about her, the better, considering there are very few people in places where you don't know what's going on." Another burning question coming out of the show so far is the Grand Inquisitor. The character, played in live action by Rupert Friend and voiced in animation by Jason Isaacs, was stabbed by Reva at the end of the 2nd episode, seemingly dropped dead right after. But Star Wars Rebels definitely featured a Grand Inquisitor that is very much alive, looking very much like the Grand Inquisitor that we saw in the Obi Wan Kenobi show, leading people to believe that maybe it isn't the same character. He addressed the Grand Inquisitor's fate before saying he would never break canon, and now, when the interviewer directly asked him if the 2 Grand Inquisitors are indeed the same, Harold responded, "I know there's speculation about that but I won't speak to that beyond saying that Rupert is just a champ in his articulation of the character. I love the rhythm of what he does with the voice for that character, who's that physically intimidating. He looks like a tank, but he speaks with such lyricism. So that juxtaposition is unique and interesting. He's not the aquiline, thin, snewy school teachery creepy guy. So I love what he did with the character. And I did too, and I want to see more of him. I was hoping would have got him back by now. As we've learned now, after watching 4 episodes of the show, Obi-Wan Kenobi is actually about Ewan McGregor's Obi-Wan/Ben watching over a young Leia whose life is put at risk after being captured twice. The fact that Obi-Wan has had quite a few adventures with young Leia has made some people question if the princess's message to him in A New Hope even makes sense anymore. But to Joby Harold, the show validates Leia's petition even more than before. This is something I hadn't mentioned until now, but I definitely had an issue and did kind of a what moment, because in the episode, Chapter 4, Reva says Obi-Wan is dead. And I definitely took an issue with that, because it would seem that Leia didn't know Obi-Wan Kenobi in A New Hope. And up until now, she'd only heard him called Ben. So this is what Joby Harold said. It was very helpful to know where they were going because it answers the question of why him. So, help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope, feels less arbitrary as a choice and a decision now that we know the depth of the history they have together. In context, within which Leia says, in A New Hope, is now canon, and it's clear. So it will be articulated as the show continues, but I liked the fact that it helped reinforce and better articulate a little piece of the jigsaw that is already in place. If you watch the Star Wars stories in a row right now, you'd be like, of course she's going to say Obi-Wan. She ends up naming her son, Ben, Adam Driver. Okay, I have a problem with that, and I hope that I'm wrong. Here's the problem that I have with that. The issue is not that Leia said, help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope. That's not the issue as it relates to a young Leia knowing that she's with Obi-Wan Kenobi. The issue is what she said before that. Obi-Wan Kenobi, years ago you served my father in the Clone Wars. Now he begs you against his struggle with the Empire. I regret that I am unable to bring you my request in person, but my ship has fallen under attack and my mission to bring you to Alderaan has failed. We must see the plan safely delivered from the droid. We must see the plan safely delivered to my home world of Alderaan. This is our most desperate hour. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope. I didn't get all of that right, but that was top of my head, by the way. The problem is her saying, Obi-Wan Kenobi, years ago you served my father in the Clone Wars, and now he begs you to help him in his struggle against the Empire. If she really does know that she's with Obi-Wan Kenobi, and she carries this with her as a kid, why would she say, years ago you served my father in the Clone Wars, and why wouldn't she say, years ago when I had this adventure with you and you saved me twice? So my fear in this whole deal isn't that she says Obi-Wan Kenobi. I don't care about that. I care about the fact that in A New Hope, that does sort of take me out of it when she acts like she's never met him before. And my fear in this whole deal is that Joby Harold, and based off that quote, is focusing on her saying Obi-Wan Kenobi when that's not the issue. I have to believe the story group would take care of that. And again, I'm sorry I sound like those negative fan guys, and I don't mean to. All right. Let's get to some listener feedback.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
Mike Rotunda writes, I agree with you on this one, John, talking about the controversy around Moses Ingram. Not one person I know is acting toxic towards Moses. And I still don't have a problem with Reva as a character. I think she could actually be utilized better, but I think Moses Ingram's doing a perfectly fine job. I think that Disney is I think by Disney talking about it, it feeds it. Yep. If you don't like the character, fine. But if you're making toxic remarks about the actress, then that's a whole different thing. And I'm so tired of this toxic little group that we have in Star Wars community that are always getting acknowledged. I don't know anyone like that. I don't associate with anyone like that. And it's sad because this little group of people who make up a very small percentage of our fan base are going to make actors and directors not want to work on future Star Wars projects. That's my fear. Also, people have to understand, if you don't like a character, that's okay, but you don't get personal, right, with the actor or actress playing the part. Meanwhile, I first saw A New Hope at home. Then I saw The Empire in the theater with my dad, and I was hooked. I remember hearing the lightsaber for the first time. I never heard anything like it. But I like Kenobi. I like that we're getting Leia. We never got this so far, so this is new, and I like it. Listen, I love Star Wars, so I'm just happy we're getting new content. And ultimately, I am too, even with my nitpicks. I will still go back and watch these episodes. So, again, I'm picking on a thing that I love, but I still love it. I think that Obi-Wan has so much regret inside of him about how he failed Anakin that he almost thinks that he deserves what he's getting. When he was screaming in the fire, he sounded so helpless. I can relate a little. I had a very bad drug addiction. Wow. And I feel so ashamed of myself that I hated myself, like I couldn't forgive me. And it's tough. I got through it, and I've been clean since 2017. But those first 2 years were hard. I hated myself for what I became, but I got help. And little by little, I started to forgive myself. It's a hopeless feeling being in the clutch of an addiction. My point is, when I saw Obi-Wan screaming, getting dragged through the fire, I thought of how I felt at one time. And I hope we see Obi-Wan at least start to use the Force again and forgive himself and move on. Thank you, Mike. I really appreciate the listener feedback this week. Friend of the show, Mike Rotunda. All right. SheVP writes, John, episode 3 was incredible. That scene with Vader walking down the street was absolutely terrifying. My anxiety was raging. I'm just loving the little moments with Obi-Wan and Leia. The description he gave her of what the Force feels like made me cry. It was just beautiful. And Leia asking him if he's her real father was just so touching. I don't know if it was the Force or just her intuition that told her he was telling her the truth when he said he sees her mother's face when he looks at her. I'm beginning to understand why she named her son after him. Yeah, those are all fantastic points. And I agree. Again, the issues that I have were more just the way the story is being told, not the story itself. Visual dynamics and such. People on Twitter are calling them Obi-Wan and Obi-2. I do hope we get a season 2. The scenes with him and Vader were so good. I thought every scene with Vader was perfect. Hats off to Deborah Chow. She is just an amazing director. Great show as usual, John. I don't think I'm going to get the great show as usual, John, on this week's episode. But SheVP, as always, thank you. Also a friend of the show. Brett writes, I've been waiting for you to review this episode and give it the justice it deserves. So far, Chapter 3. So far, I loved every episode. The third episode, when Vader shows up, brought me right back to the feeling I had at the end of Rogue One. That feeling was pure bliss. Awesome, Brett. Thank you so much. You guys are all friends of the show. Brett, Brian, Miranda, who I'm going to talk about next. Miranda, I never thought the day would come when Star Wars would become the genre of pure horror. Wow. First, Marvel got a dose of being a classic horror movie out of the blue, out of the 80s with Doctor Strange, and now Star Wars is getting its foot in the door with it. This is unreal. Thank you, Miranda. And then Brian Martin asked an offbeat question, but still referencing Obi Wan Kenobi. In your personal opinion, which actor do you prefer as Anakin's Force ghost at the end of Return of the Jedi, and why? I prefer the Hayden Christensen as the Force ghost at the end of Return of the Jedi, because I like the idea that with him being redeemed, we get the last incarnation of Anakin Skywalker before he turned to the dark side. So I like that the Force keeps you fresh Force, fresh light side Force. And I like the continuity that it shares with the prequels. So that's why I prefer Hayden Christensen at the end of Return of the Jedi over oh my gosh, I can't remember his name now. It escapes me. Thank you so much for checking out the show. Again, I hope I didn't bum you out. For those that have stuck around, a couple things real quick. My surgery did get postponed. It'll now take place on June 21st, Tuesday, June 21st. So next week, Thursday or Friday next week will be my last episode for a little while until I recover. The surgeon ended up having to travel and would be returning. The surgery was supposed to take place at 7:30 on the 15th, Wednesday the 15th. And the surgeon doesn't get in until 9 a.m. that morning. And the only time he could do the surgery that day would have ended up being at noon. And he wants to make sure that he's fresh, that he's not tired at all for the amount of work that needs to be done to fix me. So we postponed it, unfortunately, but understandably. until June 21st on that Tuesday at 8 a.m. So your prayers are welcome. I'm doing okay. It's not been easy walking around like this, but I'm stable and just waiting to get fixed. If this is your one of your first times listening to the show, I hope that you'll support my nerd world and pick up my science fiction space opera series, EMBARK. Treat yourself, a friend, or a family member with sci-fi. It's written for adults, but great for ages 11 plus, much in the same vein as Star Wars. Available in hardcover, paperback, and audiobook. You can pick up book 1 today in ebook for just 99 cents. The first 3 books, which make a complete story arc trilogy, for just $3.99. 7 books in the series complete the story as of right now. All 7 books are available, again, in hardcover, paperback, ebook, and audiobook at Amazon.com or at mynerdworld.net. Story 1 goes like this. As Earth faces its end, the fight to rule the stars begins. Taftgardia picked the right day to upgrade his ship when fellow pilot and the girl he longs to be with, Keith Amaro, arrive needing help investigating a cryptic message left behind by her late aerospace engineer father. Unaware that an industrial accident inside Earth's largest supplier of civilian and military spacecraft has set off an apocalyptic chain of events, they make a shocking discovery. As war erupts during the global evacuation, Earth's evacuees stand upon the brink of annihilation. Realizing the significance of what they found with the help of a ragtag squadron of pilots, Taft and Keitha might be humanity's greatest hope for survival among the stars. If you like your science fiction space opera filled with romance, action, and... if you like your science fiction space opera epic filled with romance and action, then EMBARK is perfect for you. Again, go to Amazon.com, search for Jon, Jon Justice, and EMBARK, or you can go to mynerdworld.net. All right, I'll be back again next week with my thoughts, hopefully they're better, on Chapter 5 of Obi Wan Kenobi. Until then, I hope wherever you are happy, you are healthy, and you are safe. And I'll talk to you real soon. Bye.
The Force will be with you. Always.
My Nerd World.